whenever you're in need, you can reach out and research externally, but you should always seek and find the solutions internally. It all starts from you.
Welcome to episode number 26 of the 100 Successful Women, a Conversation to Inspire series. Thank you so much to each and every one of you who celebrated my milestone last week. As you all know, I completed the first quarter of the 100 Successful Women, and I am super grateful to each and every one of you who have made this possible. I'm looking forward to celebrating the next few milestones with you all. So in today's episode, I have another woman, a multi-award winning young achiever, Daisy Wu, joining us today. Daisy is the founder of Multilingual Connectors and also having a very successful career as a woman in construction. I'm intrigued by Daisy's achievement at such a young age. I am super proud of her for the great work she has been doing in a very male-dominant industry. I'm pretty sure she has a great story to share with all of us, especially for the younger generation. Daisy is a go-getter who used to be that shy Mandarin-speaking international students, and she is now the thought leaders in her industry, helping others non-native speakers to unlock their potential in the foreign country and also for more opportunities. So without further ado, let's dive into our conversation coming up next to listen how Daisy transformed from that shy young girl to the young woman who has her name in the industry today. So let's have a listen. Good evening. How are you, Daisy?
Hi, Vivienne. I'm brilliant. What about you?
I'm good. Thank you so much once again. I know that you're super busy and you got a lot of things to do, but I really appreciate that you spending some time with me today to share your story.
It is truly my pleasure and privilege. Thank you so much for having me on this show, celebrating 100 successful women.
Yeah, I'm really think that you are very your story is going to inspire a lot of people, even though I know that we haven't met in person, but I read about your stories and I saw on your social medias, young people like you doing so many great things. So before we go any further, before I go out of my topic, because sometimes I got out of topic, before I go any further, do you want to share with our audience out there, who is really Daisy Wu?
That's definitely my favorite question of all the questions banked out. And instead of doing some soul searching, I'll do something in a very, very down-to-earth way. So hi, everyone. I'm Daisy Wu. I am the founder of Multilingual Connectors, which is my mentoring practice, and the author of my first book with the same name, where I mentor and guide non-native English speakers like myself to unlock their unique advantages and build meaningful connections across cultures. I am a Chinese immigrant in Melbourne, Australia, and after spending 6 to 7 years improving English so hard in order to establish my life here in this country, I finally became an award-winning young achiever, as you recognize, in male-dominated industries. I was selected tutor in a top-ranked university where I graduated, speak at the TEDx events, interview on many international podcasts, industry panels, and got many prominent video features. Recently, I also became a winner of the Top 100 Women Award and one of the 25 construction idols at the Sydney Build Expo, where we almost met, which was one of the largest building industry exhibitions worldwide. Yet despite all of these, as is the reason why I mentioned this introduction will really bridge the distance between me and a lot of the audience, is because you, Vivienne, as far as you acknowledge my achievement as well, you probably wouldn't believe that I still would love to introduce myself as one of those who believe it's super challenging to communicate in a foreign language, and in my case, English as my second language. That's how I conclude my introduction.
People as young as you and achieve so many things. I was amazed. I was so I was like, wow, you have so many achievements, you have win so many awards, and you even spoke on TEDx stage as well. So you did mention that because you English wasn't your first language, and then you didn't use that as your obstacles, and you didn't use it as a setback for you to do the things that you want. It's not only that, from what you share with me just now, Daisy, I totally can see that there are people that like I'm really admire what you're doing, because like you say, when you introduce multilingual connectors, it is something that I think I wish something that is there when I was younger as well. And yes, we still have that so-called thoughts that English not my first language, so it's holding me back from doing something bigger as well. Look at you, you did so many great things already. I know that you have been in the industry for around 5 years. Am I right?
Yes, pretty much.
Wow. And then you have not only doing great things, but you as a little girls, sorry that I hope that you are not offended by little girl, because I can tell you that I'm so much older than you. You are young, and then it wasn't holding you back, and also you have been so successful in the male dominant industry. You should be really proud of yourself for that.
Thank you again, Vivienne, for your commendations. I was almost gonna sing this out. I'm a big, big girl. But joke aside, I did latch on in your previous. I did latch on that you mentioned English was not my obstacle. Yes and no. Yes, because it was, but no, because it's not probably an obstacle in the way that you and most people would have imagined. That is, it was my obstacle, not my bad English or the more Chinese version of English that I spoke and wrote. But it's my more perfect version of English that became a big obstacle of my progression in Australia. I will share more light briefly about this, because this ties closely to the founding story of my mentoring and coaching practice, Multilingual Connector, to build such a community. So as you know, I was from a non-English speaking country. Shanghai, China was my hometown, where I grew up with Mandarin speaking peers and family and friends. So I grew up with such a background without any privilege. I pretty much failed for the first 17 years of my life before I came to Melbourne to study. I almost feel I must give at least 200% to everything in order to get the same results as a native English speaker, like Aussie here at my university and career overseas. And so as soon as I arrived in Australia, I pushed very, very hard to improve English under a go hard or go home mentality, even though I had to, due to practical challenges, spend a lot of time with the Chinese Asian peers and family members for almost the first 3 years of living in Australia. Yet over time, later, as I became increasingly able to stay on top of translation to take on more and more amazing opportunities, I did gradually also find increasingly difficult it is to communicate in English much, much more than I was for many, many years back. And that was because over time, in a more immersive language environments, I feel I could recognize and understand English spoken in different accents and at different paces, but I didn't really adapt well to those cultural and individual differences. I could read many research papers, news articles, and technical documents with greater ease, but I still didn't feel I was competent in reading people's minds. I could write professional essays, emails, and reports to perform my daily routine tasks at work and my degrees, but I still, make so many headaches about how to frame those short messages to prompt people's action, how to grow rapport with people, to write a connecting blurb or message. And I did feel I could speak more and more fluently and articulate my thought better and better with an expanded range of vocabulary and more decent grammar. But still, there were certainly moments when I feel I wasn't that well understood and appreciated in many situations. And also looking around, there were people who even had achieved more and faster than I had without their sophisticated English skills. So these were all, points of references and confusions that kept my head spinning, later in my trajectory in Australia in the earlier years. And honestly and ironically, as my English became better over time, I grew more self-conscious, self-doubting, and more frustrated because I totally was believing that my English was the hurdle to success and to progression. But the reality just slammed me in the face. However, to put everything into perspective, I did my research just to realize that whilst there are 2.4 billion English speakers worldwide, 2 billion of those English speakers are actually non-native speakers like myself. So if I was experiencing those problems, I shouldn't be alone. Even though I wasn't one of the most struggling, but certainly I believe there should be people out there. And I did recognize some recurring patterns and common traits within the Chinese Asian population, especially that I was so familiar with as the cultural origin I grew up in. I do see this additional layer of challenge surrounding using a foreign language and also to navigate a foreign environment in a Western society, which all prompted me to found my mentoring practice in order to transform how people think, in order to influence their results.
So that's why you come up with these multilingual connectors?
Yes.
That's so good. Yeah, that's so true that people that once you get better in English, I love that you're sharing that. It's very resonating because once we learn more English, we then realize that, we have that conscious, we have that self-doubt whether the English grammar that I'm using, is that something that's really good or is it correct? But then it's true that it's not about the language, it's about the as long as the meaning is going through, it's understandable, it will connect with that other person. So I really love what you're sharing, and thank you so much for sharing that story. And for the next thing is that you mentioned about you work really hard when you come to Australia, and then I love that you're saying that before you come here you work hard as well. I love that you're actually saying that either work hard or go home. That's your mentality. So from what you are sharing, I can see that you are someone very dedicated and you are someone very persistent as well. So from what that you share, that all the things that you've been through, what is that particular aha moment or something light bulb moments that you have which allowed you to have that awareness? I know that you did briefly mention that you see people that probably wasn't as good as you, but they are a lot more successful. So what is that particular aha or light bulb moment that you have that awareness that I got that part of me getting that missing puzzle?
That's a brilliant question. And in all honesty, in hindsight, within my experience, I'll say there's probably no such thing that I would qualify as an aha moment or epiphany. But there was just a series and lineup of setbacks, pains, and bruises on my ego, which kept me stumbling and hurting as well, to the degree that I just thought I had to figure something out. And circling back to what you just commented regarding the other factors behind connecting and succeeding in the foreign environment, apart from the personal traits, there's certain elements around communicating in order to connect deeper and more meaningfully with people. But of course, none of these would have been in high conscious awareness of not just me, but perhaps many people who now still subscribing to the narratives around language barrier being one of the top hurdles, hindering them from achieving more that they really deserve. And in our situation, I'm not sure whether the term is 100% appropriate, but for the benefit of sharing, I might just put this down here. It's probably the curse of knowledge. Thinking about this, once upon a time, as we freshly embarked on the learning journey of acquiring a foreign language, it's quite easy and tempting for us to quote this and reference this as an excuse for not succeeding or for not being effective. But over time, these will fade away as we become more proficient and literate in the dominant language in a foreign environment. We actually outgrow this excuse to the degree that we must confront the actually inconvenient truths wherein we might have overlooked so many other important elements which might outweigh the language itself, as well as potentially the technical skills and competencies. So in my case, when I was at my lowest point and when I feel I really had enough and I couldn't let the status quo remain, I literally feel there were so many gaps, disjoints, and disconnects in my life, and cracks as well in how I communicated. And by the way, these are the exact terms that I typed down in the search bar in Google. So later on, by various odds, it led me into reading this book by John C. Maxwell called Everyone Communicates, Few Connect. So to start with, this book itself was so paradigm shifting and enlightening as well. And in light of my mentoring practice, as you know, in the formative years, it really opened my curiosity to further explore this subject, which is connecting with people as an art and science through the lens as a non-native English speaker and an Asian foreigner in a foreign country. And indeed, it really dawned on me that the skill of connecting with people was a missing piece of the puzzle and missing element in my social ties, which explained why later on, as I kept achieving and building up the experiences under my belt, it really crossed my mind multiple times that at my lowest points, I did feel I had so many more contacts, which are functional and transactional, but not that many connections, regardless of what language they were speaking. And just, let these issues resurface again and again. At the same time, when I did the inner work and gave birth to my mentoring as well.
So you did mention about your lowest point, and then at your that must be something that you experienced. Do you mind to share a little bit what is that moment of your lowest point that get you into that, okay, I had enough that I need to change? Do you mind if I ask what are the example of those lowest point that you have?
Yeah, well, long story short, it was during my search for my second job here. So I was very lucky to be introduced to my first job via an amazing connection, who's one of my university lecturers in 2018 when I was as fresh as in my second year. But throughout my volunteering dedications, I became more visible in front of the mind. So at one point, when I asked him for a reference check, I eventually got what I got eventually, which was the introduction to my first job. And then that also laid the foundation of me expanding my volunteering dedications. And as you saw, as I built up my volunteering dedications, my leadership skills, and as these awards and recognitions stack up under my belt, I would more or less became a bit entitled, as far as I was also the top performing in my university at the University of Melbourne in my bachelor's degree. So with all these, I would say with all these stepping stones, I feel so entitled for a better job in a multinational firm, which was where I envisaged I was heading. However, regardless of all the other additional challenges in the COVID, I did have so many difficulties in landing my second job. But in parallel, I could see my peers making leaps and bounds even faster in the absence of the so-called relevant and aligned industry experience and also perfect English.
So that's why you decided to find out that instead of being that language, is more like the mentality and mindset.
Yeah, as my ego took a hit and as these patterns keep appearing, I did have to read them as a sign from the universe, if I may put it this way. to really rethink about how I approach the language and my relationship with the language, and also how I actually was, positioning myself amongst my network. Yeah, I asked myself such harsh question as, was I intentional about just reaching out to connect with this person because I only care if that person will give me a job or not? And sometimes my answer just didn't really make myself proud because I was clearly being so intentional and so transactional. I didn't really feel happy regardless of how the outcome was and how the job panned out. Eventually, I did land a decent second job as wished, but it really took so many trials and tribulations that I totally didn't expect. In the first instance, that would have been the scenario I would have reasonably imagined as the first job hunt. Reverse case in my case.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. And then it's a lot of time. Yeah, I know that it's not something easy to admit. First thing I recently heard from a course that I did with Dean Graziosi and then with Matthew McConaughey. The things that he was mentioning, the first thing for us to change anything is to admit. Thank you so much that you actually put it out there to admit that it is the ego that is holding you back. And once we admit on the things, we then can change it, or else it is a lie that has been mentioned a few times as well. Until we make the unconscious conscious, then we can make the changes, right? Yeah.
Or we'll call this a faith, which was the original quote I also personally really like. And
that's right. Thank you so much for sharing that. So nowadays, I know that you are very passionate about helping people who have the similar background like you. So what are the group of people that you are helping nowadays?
Well, now in the mentoring capacity, most of the time, I work primarily with immigrants in Australia, most of the time who have English as their second language, like myself once, and who aspire to build a diverse and meaningful multicultural network where they're pursuing their dreams. So, in fact, quite a few of my mentees have already finished their degrees in Australia and been working here for a sizable period of time. Still, to varying degrees, I could see they used to feel so unconfident and undervalued because of exactly how they perceived various limiting factors, especially their proficiency in the English language. Even though the English skill had panned out to be so decent already, which enabled them to do way better than surviving. And actually, they're also very talented in their respective professional fields. Needless to mention that they had attractive personalities, life experiences, stories, and personal interests. But for various reasons, including their own limiting beliefs, they just feel they were living as a diminished version in this foreign culture, in this foreign language, and therefore they feel so frustrated when they freshly enter my world, wishing to be as good as I was. So for these reasons, I did see part of myself once upon a time within many of my clients nowadays and followers when they cross my path. And I really see, myself within them, which is why I really, really feel driven to help them and empower them. And that's why I see there's immense value in my mentorship and thought leadership as it's ongoing to help bring out both the tangible and intangible changes within people.
Wow. So are they mostly students like into going into the works place?
Some of them are.
Okay. Yeah, I totally think that it is, like I say, I wish that this service or this program is offered to me when I was younger, before I get into the workplace as well. I really admire what you're doing, and then I really think that you have been doing so much great thing for this group of people. And so can you give us some examples? You did mention a few that your clients that are very beautiful personalities, and then sometimes they just thought that the English is the things that holding them back. So what are the things that can you give some specific examples of the challenges of this group of people are facing, and how are you helping them?
Sure. So typically before somebody enter into a mentoring relationship with me, they would have had a preliminary understanding of the differences between a content versus a connection, as well as communicating versus connecting via consuming my educational contents on social media and those resources on my website, which is pretty much how they enter my work in the first place. Having said that, there are just so many more nuances and hurdles to put down other than the series into the practice for them to reap the benefits, which made the case for my mentorship. And I could totally relate to them that they may still from time to time feel challenged, even after they've taken some lessons on board. So as I say to many of them, I do appreciate, and I have experienced myself as well, this additional mental load of using a foreign language, let alone the other hurdles and barriers of living and establishing oneself from pretty much scratch in a new environment. And whilst people may also believe that not everyone start out with the same ability or talent to connect with people, and also not the same language skill as well, but still ultimately this is something we can cultivate and develop to become a second nature, as I would term this. And this is why in my Multilingual Connector Mastermind, which is my flagship mentoring program, I focus on guiding my mentees to develop the top 3 qualities, which I believe are so instrumental to connecting across cultures, regardless of how proficient one is in a target language. So the first quality is the basic to intermediate command of a foreign language. So on this, I have to clarify that whereas I seek to really change the common narrative and put the role of language into better perspective, I never fundamentally discount the role of language as a tool to access another culture and realm of opportunity. For sure, it is a hurdle to a certain degree. And therefore, as I also mentioned, most of my mentees are already versed in English as their second language. There still is a degree of refinement they can strive towards, which is why this is the key focus in my training, without carrying myself as a traditional English as a second language tutor or teacher. And the second quality is the mastery of communication essentials, which derives from the notion that communication, as you also acknowledged before, Vivienne, communication goes way beyond the words, what we say and what we write, but it also entail, many other essentials like verbal communication, the non-verbal clues, how we, come across, how we position our body, how we dress, how we make eye contact, are all examples of non-verbal communications in a nutshell. And besides, communication goes more than just writing and talking to people, because in order to really build and cultivate a connection, we do need to ensure that we have the right strategy in order to meet with certain people at the right place at a time that's most conducive to accelerating those bonds and connections. On this, I will draw a very famous quote by Benjamin Franklin, which is, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail, which is exactly why I had to introduce this dimension to my mentoring, which is the non-verbal part of communication related to the practical factors as hurdles to communicating. So I have to teach my mentees how they can individually strategically plan and manage their dedications in their busy everyday routines and mundane tasks in order to really make time to build and strengthen their connections, both existing and prospective, in the interest of time and resources, as well as that of the other people. Not everything happens by chance or luck. So that's the second pillar I teach them, to master better communication essentials, from the practical to nonverbal communications. And last but not least, which is my favorite part and the part which links most closely to the aha moment that we discussed, I feel the power of our mind is so underrated by the mainstream narrative, as far as there's a $1 billion English as a second language or foreign language education market compared to the personal development or mind, body, space empowerment. So in my mentoring, I incorporate this to be the mastery of human psychology and behavior. So in my understanding, this doesn't necessarily mean that one needs to become a psychology expert or be formally educated in psychology, although this will be helpful. But in my notion, as humans, we're all emotional beings. And according to studies, it is true that we let our emotions guide our decisions a lot of the time, which we then justify with logic. 90% is the data point. So the other end of the communication, it really makes sense to know better how to really understand and play to others' emotional languages, which will definitely increase our rate of success in connecting. And also, this is also my guiding philosophy. As you mentioned, I'm so hardworking, I'm a go-getter. It's all because I believe self-mastery must come before any sort of mastery, whether it's a foreign language or professional skill that we seek to master, including the skill of connecting with people, which is also part of the learning for everyone, myself included, despite being a mentor.
Well,
so such thing can include a self-image, inner beliefs, one's paradigm. So all this inner work, it can't be missed, which is why connecting must start with, in my philosophy, from the inside out, not from the outside in. That's why you must go hand in hand with the other two pillars. You have the time, space, and people in front of you. You have the language as a foundation, but still you have to master your mind and be able to command the mind and emotion of others. So that's the three pillars underlying my mastermind.
Okay. Yeah, so that's so great that you sharing your pillars with us. So because you did mention about those three pillars, you might to repeat that again. I know that the last one is the inner works, but the first two is what's the first two again?
So the first one is the basic to intermediate command of a foreign language. It's subjective, but it just puts the language into perspective in the bigger picture. The second one is to master the communication essentials, which is further to mastering one's psychology and human behavior.
Wow. So for those of the mentees that come to you, do you see that what are the outcomes that they want normally? Is it to become more confident or to get to a certain job space? What are the bigger or the common outcome for them to come to you?
Yeah, because my mentees now come from all walks of life, they're not just the construction and property industry where I established my corporate and academic career in the first instance. So the common outcome now overlay to be in a more intangible realm, as you mentioned, confidence, and also they feel they have a more expansive self-image such that enable them to dream bigger instead of playing smaller. And they also can feel they're more self-disciplined and they are also in a position to influence others as well. And as a byproduct of all of these, any tangible results in the job space and in the social space is not a surprise. It's a given.
So that probably is so-called is a bonus from being confident. So being able to put themselves out there. So that's the bonus of getting maybe the better pay or better position in the industry.
Yeah, these are the tangible outcomes which would have, in the first instance, motivated many mentees as far as I'd already delivered results the same nature. But acknowledgeably, work is work, and that's only one dimension of life. And for one to really have a fulfilled life, we do have to bank on quality social connections, not just the commercial outcomes, not just the deals, not just the dollar signs on the contract. Take the workplace as an example. Of course, one wants to play to the rules of the game to stay on top of the politics, which is front of the mind in the case of some of my mentees who still have the English as a hurdle. But after they bypass the point, they eventually also want to, have some quality and authentic social ties where they spend a lot of hours weekly in the 9 to 5. So that makes the case for endeavoring in the other dimensions, focusing on the non-transactional and the non-functional. And I would argue that this is a better starting point compared to the functional as a motivator behind networking. Yeah, because if you practice under that sort of mentality of just genuinely connecting with people, then one is then less likely to be so concerned about the avenues. But so many FAQs as to where to find the best networking avenue, where could I really find the quote unquote right people? My response to these questions will be, what are your objectives? And it's likely that the more transactional, the more agenda-driven one is, the harder it then becomes, because they are so intentional and they are so attached to the outcomes. Whereas if one just shows up open-minded and becomes so receptive to any sort of outcomes, I, in those scenarios, do buy into the law of attractions. And without being so esoteric, I could say one is more likely to practice in a different mindset, which also affect the behavior which projects into the results in those scenarios when they prime their mind differently.
Yeah, that's so true. So for you to helping with your mentees to overcome their own challenges, and for you yourself to be in this position today, you have been in this industry for 5 years, and then you have been winning all these title and awards. So for you to come to this far, what are some of the, you obviously have some advice because you have jumped through that hurdle yourself. So what are your tips for people who are having some setbacks in their life?
My answer to this partially relates to the power of network, which is a tremendous source of research and knowledge and insight for us to sample and lean on. But eventually, my idea will come down to whenever you're in need, you can reach out and research externally, but you should always seek and find the solutions internally. It all starts from you, from the inside out.
So yeah, I love that, to seek from internally instead from externally. So for you to like, I know that I mentioned you have been running your own business, Multilingual Connectors, and then you're still working for another company in the construction field. And how do you mind if I ask, how do you balance, or how do you juggling between these nowadays?
I wouldn't frequently use the word balance because such thing doesn't exist. And as you see, it certainly doesn't exist in my life. And it is also not something I pursue as the endpoint. Because balance gives you the notion that there might have to be an even split, and therefore sacrifice should have a burning passion of one thing. But does that mean I have to cut my corporate hours half and half, with the remainder to being tutoring, mentoring, etc., etc.? It doesn't have to be this way. So integration is the model I play, which is not to say that I'm multitasking a lot during my contract hours. It certainly isn't the case, and I'm mindfully making this statement on the show. But using integration as a metaphor, I am depicting the exact stage where you can be more expensive. Your mind should be more expensive to see how you can create more time and more opportunities, and therefore, you will eventually figure out how to work smarter, not just harder. Yeah. So a very relevant philosophy I also live by to share here is you have to really, really think about and to have clarity about your what and why It's only when you emotionalize them enough that you will have conviction that, yes, this is what I have to do. I have to mentor this many mentees a year. I have to write this book, which I did over the last 6 months. But in the meantime, I'm not going to sacrifice my corporate career and my academic career, because I also attached certain values to each and every of them respectively. So after I've arrived at the clarity, I then, think about the how. But I see many people start from the house. They firstly list out all the things they have to do and say, wow, that's a lot to float on my calendar. I can't do it. Without firstly thinking about, why should I consider adding this piece, that block onto my plate? Are they meaningful? Do they weigh all the same? Yeah.
Wow.
So I personally come to terms with everything I have, and I am at the moment happy with what I have. I don't see there's any structural changes needed at this stage, but I'm certainly open to restructuring, because I can't just, I'm somebody who easily gets bored after a few years or even a few months if I remain where I am, thinking about the same problem, working with the same people, or at least, being at the same place intellectually or mentally.
Well, love that. Love that you're saying that, of course, there's no balance, but then it's like you can't balance things. It's all about, recently someone told me about optimization instead of balance. And I love that you're sharing, you start with the end in mind to know that why are you doing it, and you're weighing the priority, which one is like, is that deserve my time to do this or no, and you're happy with where you are. That's the thing. And yeah, that's such a great piece of advice that you're giving to us there. Thank you so much for that. So another thing that I probably would like to know is that if there are things that you are currently doing, what is it in this phase of your time? What are some of the challenging things or the challenges that you are facing right now?
Right now, as I mentioned, I always challenge myself to pursue bigger and different goals, and I do give myself a 6-month period for me to realign and reflect. So simple measure is, if right now what I have on the mind is a problem as a qualifier of this sort, will it remain a problem in 6 months' time? And if it does, then this might be a sign I haven't really expanded or grown or outgrown this problem. That is to say, I haven't really grown as much as I have.
Can you say that, so you are saying that if in 6 months' time, if this is a problem, that means that you haven't grown or you haven't expanded. So how do you measure, or how do you know whether in 6 months' time, whether this is going to be a problem or no?
Well, some problems could be really tangible. For instance, once upon a time, how did I find the clients, or how did I write the social media without worrying about how my employers are going to perceive me? These sort of things. But surely I had, outgrow these points, and I knew if I didn't outgrow these points, I will stagnate, and I may even take a step back. There's no way to stay put.
Wow.
If I may draw another example, which may be more comprehensible or more, I guess, universally adaptable to the audiences. As you mentioned, there is a portion of my clients who are early career professionals, and some of the motivators at the start of the mentoring session will be to better their English, or more specifically, their communication and connecting skills in their foreign language, in order to convert better job opportunities. So at the starting point of my mentoring, this was their problem. But 3 months was probably already the half point of the 6 months period. Hopefully, they would have already capitalized on my mentoring program to convert the job. So that means the next phase of the problem for them to contemplate would likely be how I should seek to transition in a new job, how I could build up my advocates on the job, how I could rise up to the politics. So that would be the next level of problems. So if I draw one of my typical mentees as an example, if 6 months from now they're still thinking about how to find a job, then clearly as it's practically measurable, they haven't grown. They haven't solved their problem efficiently as they should have.
So you are looking at it from 6 months from now, and then you will be.
It doesn't have to be 6 months; could be 3 months. It just flies by. And right now, we're interviewing. It already takes us to the end of the financial year at the midpoint of 2023. Yeah,
I see. Well, that's a great advice to be able to measure that and then to see that whether you have grown enough or expand enough. That's something that is, maybe I should try that as well. Thank you so much for that. And I know that this is 100 Successful Women conversation. So the main purpose of this conversation is to inspire more women out there. So what is the one piece of advice that you can give to other women out there?
Right. I expect you, or perhaps some of the audience, to expect me to say a few words about gender equality and diversity, which are so common narratives in industries I'm primarily practicing in the corporate career. But actually, as somebody who's making her mark in male-dominated industries as Chinese women in a Western society, I would tell my fellow girls and women, especially those identifying as a member of any minority group, almost none of what you're born with can virtually make or break you, really, whether it's your gender, your race, appearance, language abilities, family background, and so forth. I believe what ultimately makes or breaks what we do with what we are and what we have is how we deal with this and how we respond to this.
Love that. Yeah, I truly believe that people is advocating gender equality, gender equity, but then look at where is Daisy now? She is so she's not dimming her light for others. She being that special one. She's being that the only, like I saw from one of the awards that you mentioned, you are the only Chinese girls in that categories. So it is something that you can use Daisy as an example. She did so well. If she got a very great role model for you to see that when you set your mind to something, you are able to get it, right?
Yes, indeed. I'm certainly not making such a statement from the vantage point. I've been through most of what these girls and women have been facing, what so-called glass ceilings, or what they may term as bamboo ceilings, as applies to my cultural heritage. But these may be real, but I also buy into the power of our mind, and I feel it's so conducive as a way of living, and so liberating as a way of living, to just leave behind all those narratives or head trashes. Because the moment you really label yourself as a marginalized population, or one prone to be so, you are so likely to backslide into the victim mentality, and therefore we just diminish ourselves as a data point, one of the marginalized group or outcast women in a corporate or women in a male-dominated field. We don't have to be such a thing, and we don't have to be quoted even as a gender, because we are individual beings. We are not just defined by our gender or race. And I certainly appreciate those kind gestures and those advocacies out there to make the workplace and industry more inclusive and more representative of these minority groups. But on the receiving end of those initiatives and campaigns, I certainly feel we don't have to be always spoon-fed, and we don't always have to look up for those to trickle down. We ourselves should take a bottom-up approach or inside-out approach to go for whatever we want, and just see where the ceiling is, where we can hit. I believe it's quite likely that so many people have barely made it to the hard point where they may hit the ceilings. And the lowest ceiling to hit right now may be the one we impose or imagine around ourselves. That's the low-hanging fruit. Top.
I love that. That's so well said. Thank you so much for sharing that piece of advice to all the women out there. And it's so true. It is all the limitation that we have is we impose, we put it on for ourselves. And I love that you are mentioning about the glass ceiling, because it is a creation by ourselves. It's all the invisible things that we're limiting ourselves from going further or going bigger. I love that you're sharing that. And then thank you so much for your time with us. And where can people find you online, Daisy?
Thank you so much, Vivienne. It's an absolute pleasure to interview here and share with your community who I am, what I stand for, and what I do as an advocate for not just the non-native English speakers like myself and you once upon a time, but everyone aspiring for a better life with quality connections from away from home. I do welcome the audience to stay connected with both of us and reach out for any opportunities where we can provide value to each other. They can find me on LinkedIn as Daisy Wu, the founder and author of Multilingual Connectors, and daisywu.multilingualconnector on Instagram. Besides, for our audience who want to build connections more effectively across cultures, I do have a free ebook on my website where I share the secrets to build connections with no language barriers, literally. So whether they feel they're limited currently by their language abilities or feel they are already skilled in the language, but still not building as many connections as contacts, my ebook can provide the 4 game-changing steps as a 12-pager for them to master connections without mastering languages based on my experience and research over my years in the multicultural society we both live in. So they can find this on my website, which I can put in your show notes.
Yeah, I will include that in the description or on the video later. And then I will get the ebook download link from you as well, so that if anyone wants to download, they can click on the link to download as well. Yep, thank you so much for your time with us this evening, Daisy. Is there anything that you would like me to ask that I haven't asked yet?
When are you coming to Melbourne before I ever visit Sydney?
Oh, that's a great question. So maybe wait until the winter is over, because Melbourne have the most craziest weather for me. So I'm not very good with winter, but then definitely I will visit Melbourne one day.
Yeah. And if I may ask one more to be more on topic, what is the biggest takeaway that you've learned throughout our conversations? And after yours, I will share mine.
Well, that's a question that I haven't really asked by any of the guests. That's a good one. So I think from what I get from your sharing today, it's about, like I said earlier, language is the limitation that we're putting on ourselves. Because yesterday, literally, I was browsing through a video, which I'm trying to send to a friend, and I saw that one photographer, he's actually taking the photos of someone else. That photos actually telling a lot of stories from that one piece of photos. But it's not only that, the person that he is taking photo on are people who are deaf and they can't even speak a language. They, not to say language, they can't even speak a word. They use sign language. So English is just a limitation we are putting on ourselves, whether it's you speak better English or no, as long as you have that connection. I don't know how many grammatical mistakes that I have been making throughout this video, even though I did like 25 episodes. There's still mistakes as well. There are people still commenting on my poor English, but F it. I don't care as long as I deliver my message, right? And I really love that what you're doing, Daisy, because you help a lot of people to get through that barrier and to reach their goals. And this limitation is all we are putting on ourselves. And just go out there and do the things that you want. And just like what Michelle Yeoh was saying, smash that glass ceiling.
That's how she got to speak at Oscar.
That's right. I love that. I really love that. And then it's all things is possible. And if you set your mind to it, you can get what you want. And look at what Daisy is doing. And I really love your stories. Thank you so much for sharing that with us today, Daisy.
Thank you for your kind words, Vivienne, and appreciate your vulnerable share of how you were receiving and processing the other comments, apart from all the commendations and tributes to you. And I believe on that, what I share as my biggest takeaway from this conversation is going to benefit you and propel you to go further, which is the power of sharing. So like many of the podcasts and panel events I've done before, every time I get to share my voice, either prepare or impromptu in imperfect English, this really gives me the energy to really do more. And I'm sure there will be more than one flaw in my share, but I did make a conscious decision to not break the flow of the dialogue I've thoroughly enjoyed. And also, I was also fueled by the notion that sharing is caring. It's more about the intent behind the message, not just the message itself or the quality of the language itself, which is exactly why I do what I do, and resonating with you as well. We ourselves are probably the biggest influencer and therefore the hurdles to achieving more. And that's exactly why in my mentorship, I play with the model where self-mastery must come before all mastery. And therefore, I teach people to build connections by self-mastery, not language mastery.
I love that. Self-mastery is more than other mastery. I love that. And that's so true. It's such a blessing for you to, for me to hear what you're sharing today, Daisy. And yeah, I really appreciate your time with us. So before we wrap up the conversation today, is there anything that you would like to say?
I'd love to be on the show in other capacity one day again. As women's, let's celebrate 100.
Oh, thank you so much. And I'm looking forward to hear more about your multilingual connectors and can't wait for your books to come out. And yeah, for those of you who has been listening, make sure you follow multilingualconnectors.com and wait for the announcement of the release of Daisy book as well.
Yes, they can already register their interest and do the following.
Yep, definitely. I will do that and I'll include the link. And for those of you out there, make sure you connect with Daisy if you find that you need some assistance, or I know that a lot of people out there who probably resonate with what you're sharing tonight. Thank you so much once again, and hopefully you can maybe get you up here to share more next time.
My pleasure. Much appreciated.
Thank you so much and see you next time, Daisy.
See you.